Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the In the Swine Barn series with South Dakota State University and Washington State University. This is our third webinar of the series, and I say we're just starting to get our participants in, but in sake of time, I always like to try to get these started on time for you all. We have an exciting program today that I think is created a lot of attention for some of our youth producers. But before we start, I'm just going to take care of some good housekeeping. If you have questions, please post those in the question and answer section. Jamie Sackman with the Washington Pork Producers will be watching that question and answer box, and she will have those questions ready for our speakers as we go on after we finish our videos and stuff. If you have issues with your computer or logging, well, you're obviously logged on, but if you have any formatting issues, I know last time I had a box in front, please post those in the chat section and I'll try to take care of those. I have a poll for you guys right quick to answer. I'm going to launch it. Basically, the question is, how are you involved with the show pig industry or world, however you want to talk about it? Mark all that apply. Are you a youth raising show pigs? Are you a show pig producer for exhibition? Are you on here as an educator, extension person? Do you do some livestock judging? Are you a parent? Or are you one of those fair goers that just likes to go watch a good pig show? So I'm watching those come in. So for our panelists today, just so you know that the majority of people that we have on here are youth that are raising show pigs. We also have almost 2 handfuls of show pig producers. And we've got a good number of extension educators, leaders, or advisors that are on here, and parents too. And 1 person that is a judge. So I'm going to end the polling there. Just, I want to introduce Jamie Sackman again. Jamie, you might say hello so that your screen pops up.
Hi, on behalf of Washington Pork Producers, thanks again to South Dakota for partnering with us on this, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Ryan Samuel. He's going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. But as Jamie said, we can't thank South Dakota State University. Dr. Bob Thaler could not be on with us today, but this webinar series would not be possible without them, and they really tapped into a great resource for us today. So with that, Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Very good, thank you. Welcome, everyone. So today, as we talked about, we're going to talk about selecting a show pig and getting it off to a good start. So we're happy today to be able to join by Mr. Ben Olson. He's going to be on today and be able to answer questions. So if you have questions, again, put those into the question and answer section, and he'll be able to address those. I'm Mr. Olson, as a 3rd-generation purebred producer here from Irene, South Dakota. The Olson Yorkshires provides quality genetics for the show pig and commercial industry. And so we'll hear a little bit more about Ben and his experience, and then he's going to talk us through in the video points about selecting a show pig and what you're looking for, and getting off to a good start and working with your breeder. And with that, Sarah, if you want to get the video started, and then we'll address questions as they appear, and we'll have some questions directly after the video section.
Hi, well, welcome back to South Dakota. It's been a month since we've done our first video with the pork producers out in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And we focused on the south side, what happens during the farrowing process. And today we're going to do something a little bit differently. As I learned, the show pig industry is a huge component out in the northwest part of the United States. So we thought one of the things that we would do as we approach this time of year is a lot of people will be purchasing show pigs. And so what this video is going to focus on some of the things for young people to look at when they go to in-person sales, when they go to private treaty places, when they do online sales. What are some of the things that they should look out to pick out the right show pig for them? And today we're really lucky. We have Mr. Ben Olson here from Irene, South Dakota. His family started producing Yorkshire pigs in 1953, one of the preeminent Yorkshire breeders in the country. And as times change, they've adapted. Ben's a third generation on this place, and they're some of the best show pig people in the country. Ben was also an SDSU graduate, was on our livestock judging team, does a lot of judging all over the country. And so I'm just going to turn it over, Ben, if you want to talk a little bit about your operation, the things that you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're located here in Irene, South Dakota. We've got 100 sow herd consisting of Yorkshires, Hampshires, Durocs, and crossbreds, focusing on raising breeding stock, show around because there is shows all year round where we can market pigs to, sell them privately as well as online sales throughout the year. We have a couple bred gilt sales as well as spring online prospect pig sales as well.
So as you've looked at how the show industry changes and stuff like that, you've been very successful. What are some of the shows and stuff that you guys have done well at?
Yeah, and just to back up a little bit, you know, my dad, my grandpa started this in 1953, the year my dad was born, by purchasing his first Yorkshires. And at that time, it was all about selling boars to farmers because everybody had hogs.
Right. Yep.
And that continued for many, many years. And even through my younger years of my life, we focused on having production sales, selling breeding stock and boars was a huge part. As I got into college, around the year 2000 and that, things really changed.
Right. Yep.
As the commercial small producers diminished and the show pig industry grew and grew and grew. And fortunate for me, that enabled me to have this as a livelihood, the way this industry has changed and had such a great growth in the show pig industry where people can make a living doing this.
Right,
Yeah.
with 150
Yes.
sows,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can do it. So,
Yeah.
and so what are some of the shows you guys have been successful in?
We attend most of what is the National Swine Registry shows. We go to the World Pork Expo, which is called the Exposition now, the Summer Type Conference in Louisville. Indiana State Fair is a big state fair. We usually like to get to that state fair. The National Barrow Show in Austin, Minnesota. Duncan, Oklahoma, we'll go to in the fall. And then next week I'll actually be going to Texas to the Southwest Type Conference in Belton, Texas.
Okay.
So
again, you know, they've been successful, and you got a breeder here who really understands what works in the show ring, what judges like, but also Ben not only has judged on the SDSU livestock judging team, but I'm sure you've done a bunch of other state fairs and shows throughout the country, right?
yeah, I've been fortunate. I guess I've lost count of how many states it is, but from Texas to Indiana and everywhere in between, I've had the opportunity to judge and got some opportunities early on, straight out of college and even in college. And this summer, I've got an opportunity to judge the exposition, which will be, as big as any.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, with that introduction now, I think we'll go ahead and move out to the barn and the show ring, and Ben's going to bring out some pigs and talk about some of the things that you guys all need to look for when you think about buying a project pig. Okay, we've left the office. We're out in the show pen now, and so we've got one of Ben's pigs here, and born in November, I guess. So Ben, as young people take a look, what are some of the key components that they need to be aware of when selecting a show pig?
Yeah, tons of different things as you get into details, but big picture wise, we got to look with one that has a good skeleton. First and foremost, that the skeleton is right in terms of just design on the side of the profile, that they're level in their makeup, they've got some extension through their front end, and they've got a good hip design. In terms of the skeleton, the structure, as you get on down to the ground, is also a huge factor. And the simplest way to say it would be, as they come at you and go away, we want them to be just true and square to the ground, not bowing in or turning out. Either one of those, just as true and square as can be. And then as they walk on the side, there needs to be some angulation and flex, backward slope, I guess you call it, to the front knee, so they're not too stiff and straight off the front end. And through their hock, they need to be able to flex and go through their hock in order to reach and stride. Skeleton is, I truly believe, the most important part that we have to look for, because that is the one thing you're not going to be able to change with the feed bucket as time goes on. So I think you got to focus on balance, design, structure. Most importantly, the obvious things, of course, if you back up, would just be natural muscle dimension, rib shape, in those things. But the skeleton is as true, and really to put one over the top, you got to have some heaviness of skeleton as well. Some extra leg size, some stoutness of feature, not only through the skull, but on down to the feet, and have a good set of big feet with even toes in pasterns that have, the right amount of strength to them. Not too straight and upright, but not too soft and squishy.
So you talked about indicators of feet and legs that we need to look at. That's good. So what would be some key indicators of muscle?
Yeah, the easiest way to say that would be just the shape over their top. You want to have them to have kind of a square shape, to even maybe even an arched butterfly shape to the top. They can be. And then you get around behind them, just have some shape. You want the widest part. You do not want the widest part of the skeleton to be in the middle. That would probably be an indicator that they are heavier conditioned and lacking a muscle if you're the widest there. As you can see, she's got some dimension to her hip, some shape and power to her front shoulder as well.
Okay, so we've got to have animals that have good bones, that can walk well. They have to have plenty of muscle, especially looking across the top and the ham area. What would be the next thing? Are there other things then you take into consideration?
As you get into the details, in terms of if you're going to show a breeding gilt, you want to make sure they have a high quality underline and a quality vulva as well. I think if you can get this one here, I think that this one's pretty ideal in terms of her underline, especially her vulva is set really good in her size and shape. And that would be some extra details in terms of breeding gilts. Market hogs, if you want to win the biggest, toughest shows, they just need that extra wow factor in terms of the look and shape and added structure to go along with that good skeleton.
So if they're looking at a breeding gilt, what would be the minimum number of teats you'd want to have on there?
Yeah, for a purebred breeding gilt, we definitely need at least 6 on each side. Ideally 7 on each side in all reality. But spacing is also important, and the quality of them, that there isn't an underline that's too blunt and coarse, or one that simply too refined that doesn't have any definition to it. So there's a happy medium to that as well.
Okay, so you said this pig was born in November.
Yep.
When it comes to sale time, what would be the lightest weight you would have pigs coming into a sale?
These days, they can get sold pretty young. I would say 30, 35 pounders get sold, fairly often. I personally prefer to wait just a little longer, till they're at least 40 to 50. And this gilt actually just sold in an online sale last week and is getting delivered the following. But we wait and hold on to some of our pigs and sell them later, just because you got more confidence in what they're really going to be. And as we talk through all these things and you go out and make your decisions and purchases, you got to realize if you buy a little 40 or 50 pound animal and you want to finish that hog at 275 pounds, there's a lot of changes that can happen between the purchase time and the show time. And you just got to do your best educated guess on predicting those things. And that's why, if one has just a little more size on it, you got, a little more advantage in terms of predictability of what's going to happen.
And I think the other thing too, so if you're coming from Oregon or Washington and buying a dozen show pigs, you're taking them back. That animal, if it's in the 50 to 70 pound range, is going to be able to handle that stress a lot better than something a lot younger. So definitely,
and that's one of the things that we can get into as well as when these are transported all over the country, you got to make sure you get them off to the right start. And if the breeder didn't give a shot, maybe like a Draxon or something as a preventative before the shipment occurs, you definitely want to keep your eye on it and just give that shot in case it doesn't handle the stress of the move as ideal as you'd like.
So the first thing to do is probably have to have health papers, right? Going across state lines.
Yes, anytime you cross state lines.
And then work with the owner and making sure if they're going to be shipped, what kind of pre-sale or post-sale treatments there are.
Yeah, most guys that buy pigs from me will give me a text or a call. Did you give that pig a shot of Baytril or Draxon before you loaded it? And what has he or she been vaccinated for? Whether it's your mycoplasma, your erysipelas, your PRRS, your flu, your Circo, and that becomes increasingly important if a guy is going to buy from multiple different breeders, where you get hogs commingled that comes from herds with all different health statuses.
That's a really good point there. So again, it's you're actually, when you bring a group of pigs together, you're inoculating everybody with the diseases that everybody else has. So and I know you struggle out in the Pacific Northwest about good swine veterinarians, but you need to find some people to talk to if we're bringing commingling pigs in together, what the right program is. How about getting them started on feed and water, Ben?
Yeah, you bet. And one other thing, as far as if you bring one home and you've already got a few, it probably wouldn't be the worst idea to somewhat isolate it for a week to 10 days to see, if that hog did pick up anything in a third-party transport hauler with a group. You don't want to get all your other pigs at home sick right away. You get that pig on track before it actually goes nose to nose with maybe the pigs that you have already. But once you get it home, make sure you spend some time with it, knowing that it's getting off to the right start, that it's finding the water, getting plenty of all the fresh water it can possibly have, being in a comfortable temperature environment with clean bedding. And then, as far as the feed goes, that's another deal. It's easy just to text the breeder saying, you know, what percent protein was that pig on, or what do you recommend, and just get them, whether it's a pig that was on 18% and should stay there as the breeder maybe feels you don't want to drop that one way down to 15 instantly, and just work with your whoever you purchase this with to get them off to as good a start as possible.
Okay, so now we've got Duroc joining our New York here, and so Ben, why don't you just walk through a few differences between the two pigs so the people out in the Pacific Northwest can get an idea of really what you're talking about and what to evaluate on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of differences amongst breeds in terms of what maybe to expect as far as their maturity patterns, and I think we can see some of that in these two hogs right here. Typically, a Duroc gilt, in order for her, or a Duroc barrel gilt, whichever, to look good in the end, they've got to be a little more immature at a young age, or they become, I guess, too much. I guess I would say it in the simplest term. And I think this gilt is a really good in terms of her immaturity. She's not as big and bulky and powerful as the Yorkshire gilt here, but you know, that's one of the things that if you visit with the breeder, and I think it's important to get a little background on what they expect from the genetics behind them, how they're going to develop and what they're going to do. And the Duroc is one that I could call is later maturing. She's not as big and bulky. She's really tall fronted. She's extended through her front, and I think is the kind that gets better with age and really hits their prime at that 250 to 300 pound weight range. Whereas, you know, the Yorkshire is one that's extremely stout and powerful, big-legged, got a ton of natural dimension, and she's going to show better early on, but she also is going to maintain that maturity, I think, to kind of look that same way all the way through. So those are some of the most biggest differences between these two, and it's about kind of building a relationship with the guy that you buy them from, and figuring out, you know, how the pigs are going to develop and what's going to be the best thing, because is another thing is, you know, they're not all going to grow the same. Right. We need to figure out when your target final show date is to have them 12 o'clock, and you know, if you are going to maybe exhibit a Duroc barrel, maybe you'll only want him to be 6 months old at your show time. If you want to show a crossbred barrel, there's some crossbreds you want to be 8+ months old at your final show. And that all comes with building that relationship with that breeder you buy them from, in terms of knowing what the expected outcome would be.
You know, and the other thing, just watching too, Ben, you can see that even though, yep, they're different. I mean, the Duroc still got those same critical points that you talked about. I mean, great feet and legs. You know, when you look at the muscle, the hams are still much bigger than the loins on top, and pretty flat going across. So again, it's different, but those key critical things are there, and when you watch it move, it looks pretty good.
Exactly. I mean, we get back to what I said is the most important thing to focus on. What's not going to change with the feed bucket, the skeleton, and the structural integrity. And we've got, you know, two hogs that are very similar that way.
You know, oftentimes, Ben, when young people first get started, you know, everybody wants to win the show, everybody wants to do well, and raising the pig is certainly an important part of that. But what other things would make a young person successful showing pigs in the show ring?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in the 4-H or livestock judging programs. I think it's an important educational tool that you'll be extremely rewarded with your show projects the more you learn and educate yourself in the judging aspect, because it just helps you know what to look for and recognize some of the changes that you might need to make in the feeding program, and realize if something's wrong, the best thing to do is be able to correct it immediately. If one is limping slightly, you might not notice it the first day if you're not really paying close attention. But if you don't catch it on the first day, a swollen hock or an issue like that, they're going to become incredibly hard to cure. If one goes off feed and is slightly ganned up and not as full, I think those that have a trained eye, where they've went through some judging programs to see those differences, can recognize those, get those animals treated on day 1 rather than day 3, and solve them.
Ben's done a really nice job of talking about those basics that you want to look for when you buy a show pig, so you know what the pig needs to look like. Now the next step is, where do you get them from? And so there's really 3 options. You can have an in-person sale that people still have. There's a huge growth of online sales, and then also there's private treaties. So Ben, you want to talk about those 3 and kind of give kind of a summary what the process is like?
First of all, a traditional live auction, whether it be one breeder putting on a sale or a group of consigners, I think is a great opportunity in order to see a group of pigs together, make some comparisons, and a decision that day. I think it's really a fun event to go to as a family and make a trip. But on that same line, that may be the one limiting factor with a live auction, is it might be 500, 700 miles away from where you live, which limits your opportunity to maybe attend and do that in person. So we used to have a lot of live auctions, but we used to have, living in South Dakota, so many people just gave us phone bids. And weren't able to drive that distance. So we transitioned to the online sales, where people could sit at home on their computer and make their purchases basically as they were when we were having the live auction, but just put it all out in front of you. And there's unlimited opportunity with the online auctions. During peak sales season, you'll easily see 15 to 20 sales a night from breeders all over the country, selling anywhere from 10 to 100 plus pigs. So huge opportunity. And then of course the private treaty sales. If you can build a relationship with a breeder, and some smaller breeders just prefer to sell them privately, and actually we are along the lines of, in the fall of the year, we prefer to sell our pigs privately to kind of the southern market, as compared to the spring we sell them online. So we still do a lot of private treaty as well. But I think the biggest key in all 3 of the methods is developing a relationship with the breeder, where you can trust what they have to say, have a good open line of communication, and be able to ask questions. I feel if you ask a question and it doesn't get answered, I guess they must not want to sell you pigs too much, because I think that's an extremely important part. They can send you videos of the pigs in the online sales if they didn't post them, where you can get another good view of them as well. And like we talked in the discussion of selection, you can get some ideas of how that pig's going to mature if you've got that relationship built, and what to expect, because the breeder probably knows best the sow and the boar behind them.
Sure, you might even have the opportunity to show what half sibs or full sibs look like from from the past year and what they grew up and looked like.
Definitely, yeah. There's experience is always a good thing.
Right. And again, you know, young people out there, I mean, you know, and maybe because I'm an old guy, but personal relationships are huge in everything you do. So the more you can get to know the breeder, the people you work with, that's just huge. And the other thing is integrity. And you know, and talk about, you know, there's enough people out there in the show industry. Talk to people, find out who are credible sources, who are good people you can trust with high integrity, and maybe some of those that you want to stay away from. So again, personal relationships are great. So probably the last thing, Ben. So okay, I get in line, I buy one of your pigs. I got the one I want. I'm pretty excited. Yep. What are the next steps?
We got to arrange delivery. Basically,
right.
And that's fairly simple. Usually the delivery options are listed, and basically you pick one of those, you text or call, get it lined up, get it paid for online, and we're off and rolling. You know, and don't ever be afraid or hesitant to continue the conversation and relationship throughout the project. I think that's one of the most important things. And with these cell phones we got these days, it's so easy to text. Even if I am busy, I can respond a couple hours later. Or if you want to show me something rather than explain it, right, send me a video. It's a great opportunity and really a key component in having success with your project.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope this gave you some things to think about. Hopefully it's a good start, and with that, we'll wrap it up. So thank you very much, Ben.
Yep.
I appreciate
Thanks.
it. You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, Jamie, do you have some questions for Ben?
Yes, we do. Ben, we had a few questions come in. A couple of them, some clarifications on some terms that you used. One is, what is meant when you said the backward slope to a front leg?
Yeah, and we might get some pictures of this into the judging slides as we get go forward with this deal. But that front knee, how it goes in, you know, kind of a shape. You know, if they are a straight line, that front knee is too straight and stiff, and you don't want them bucked over as well, where they're forward, but you just got to have some backward slope in there to have comfort and cushion in order to go. And there you put up the slide right there that really illustrates that really good. As you can see the angulation and how it kind of slopes back from the foot up to the ankle. There's that kind of curvature.
So, but we don't want too much curve where those dew claws are back or on the ground also, correct, Ben?
Exactly. Yeah, that slide really illustrates it perfectly.
Okay, great. The next one along the same lines is the term butterfly when you're talking about the back.
Yes.
The loin of that hog.
Yep. You know, the muscle shape over the top. You know, pigs that really have a good shape to them will kind of have a ditch down the center of their back where their loins come up in a shape that kind of has that, I guess it's like a butterfly shape, you know, in terms of the muscle comes up on the sides and the ditch down the center. You know, it just shows the extra, you know, expression. And here again, you can kind of see that in that center slide. You know, it's not real extreme and evident there, but somewhat of a idea in that slide as well.
Okay. Next one, and sometimes we see this, but piglets that have a little bit of a hump in their back, are they going to outgrow that, or do we need to look further?
I would be very cautious of pigs that have what I call right behind their shoulder a dip, kind of a break behind their shoulder. They dip down and then they maybe come up high behind that and become really you know, far from level, I guess, would be the best, easiest way to say it. Those don't always grow out of that. When they kind of take that dip down behind their shoulder, there are pigs that if they just are strong behind their shoulder and maybe have a little bit of arch to their top, that's not the worst thing. But be very cautious of pigs and probably avoid ones that have kind of a dip right behind their blades.
Okay. Onto a little bit different topic. Talking about bringing home pigs, especially from a longer distance. Talk to us a little bit about how long we can leave pigs in trailers and trailering pigs, and probably even at different points, like a pig that we're just getting versus one that is show bound.
Yeah. As far as how long they can be in a trailer, if they're fed and watered, they can last. There's nothing wrong with them being in there a long time if you have, a comfortable environment for them in terms of their temperature, clean bedding, and they're fed and watered and taken care of real well. There's really no limit, because you can make that environment extremely good in a trailer. And if they're meaning more of how long can we go without watering one in a transport trip if they're getting delivered, it's not always the most convenient to take care of them in a trailer, especially if you got several, or if somebody else is doing it for you, they may not. And as long as you get once daily, that'll get them by, for the trip. But you definitely want to pay attention when they arrive.
Absolutely. And for the record, the very first pigs I bought, actually, Ben, came from you, and we left Irene,
Cool.
South Dakota, and 28 hours later, with one stop to feed and water, we unloaded them and they were fine despite the snowstorm in Montana.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
Absolutely. So again, a different subject, vaccinations. You went kind of through a big group of vaccinations. Some
Yep.
of those, if our folks are getting local hogs, they probably haven't been vaccinated for all those things. So if you could kind of start with what you think is kind of like, really all pigs should have this level of vaccination, and then clear up to what to expect if you're getting something out of a multi-state online auction.
Yes. They definitely need to be vaccinated for your ear syphilis, mycoplasma. That needs to be covered for sure. PRRS, that just depends on what, a lot of more details. If you vaccinate them for PRRS, I think circovirus is probably a little more important that you get them. That's not very hard to do. And then the flu virus, it's probably not a bad idea to do that as well.
Okay. Tara, if you can, I don't know if Tara can answer. Did that answer your question, or do you want some more information on vaccines? Here's an interesting question. Do you think you can still do live cover for breeding and get a competitive hog?
Definitely. It's there's no reason you can't, in terms of going and buying a good quality boar and a good quality gilt rather than semen. That opportunity is definitely there. As far as just being successful with it, in all reality, I guess, to get in a little more detail of how that goes, it's probably show gilts sometimes have leveler rumps and higher tail sets, which makes it more difficult for a boar to natural mate. So I wouldn't just turn them out together in a pen and hope that 114 days later you have a litter coming. I would make sure you're hand mating and making sure they get hooked up successfully if you are going to do that, because of the design and rump structure of most gilts that are going to generate show pigs today.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I think there's a couple other questions here. I'm going to go ahead and answer just on typing, and then I'll turn it back over to Sarah.
So yeah, what we're gonna do, you guys are asking a lot of questions that I know Ryan's gonna cover, and then we will come back again to Ben and Ryan at the end. But Ryan, you're gonna take it over now and give us some of the real visuals that Ben was able to talk about, correct?
Correct, yes. So thanks to Brady Jensen, who is our livestock judging team coach here, for some of these slides, and I'm going to go through them, and then of course you have questions, more specifics with Ben, would encourage you to follow up there. So just some of the images. So get started here. So first thing, I just wanted to put up that slide. I know Ben talked about this early on, the design of that skeleton and the profile of that pig. Brady had a couple of images here looking at what that might look like and what might you see if you were able to look inside the pig, what was going on there. So you can see some of the skeletal makeup of those, where you've got a nice level pig on that image there, and on the other where you've got that high pig kind of with that unlevel backbone and those type of things. And so you got that correct versus the incorrect and some of the things you'll see on the way those pigs are standing. Touched on this already a little bit about the leg structure. And so here's some images to look at that. Again, you've got that normal leg structure on the rear, and you've got a good angle of that. And then you can see across there as you go across that screen, where you've got the angle that's too small, angle too large, and your weak pasterns. And so those are just some images that, again, point out those points more specifically that Ben already covered in the video. Here again, taking us back, you've got a straight-legged, straight pasterned pig there, and then in the middle be that more normal, and then on the right side of that image there, excessive slope with a weak pastern. So not an ideal situation with that pig, obviously. Talked about toes, and so here's just some close-ups that you can look at. So a nice even set of toes there in the image versus uneven toes there. So we want to make sure you have a nice uniform toe size and how that looks in your pig. Some examples of some hock problems. Again, Ben touched on those pigs that are bowed out or toed out. Some of those, and then you've got swollen hocks on these, some images there. So what we can look at those and try and avoid those situations as well too. So thinking about pigs themselves. So this is a extended hog. You got more length from blade to hip, taller fronted, more extension. So that's going to be a tall, long-bodied pig, remain leaner and heavier weight than some of these other hogs. So if we look at this next picture here, we've got an early maturing, short-bodied, low-fronted, compact built, and so that pig's generally going to have a heavier weight with the lower set. Looking at some of the muscle indicators, again, has been talked across the top of that animal. You can looking down and want that square, sort of that butterfly shape. And looking at some of the other indicator points there, the blades, top, the ham-loin junction, stifle, hip, ham, and the base width of that animal, give you some ideas of what they're going to look like. And there again, just some arrows indicating those more specifically. So areas you want to look at, and you can again look across the top there and see how that animal's nice and square in the center and then wider out at the back end. So in reading the top shape, you can see some of the differences across these animals, and these are animals that were actually taken to slaughter. And so you can actually see, as we start looking at those animals, you look across the top and read that top shape. And there you can see the back fat, about 0.8 inches on that first animal. So see how that looks. Then you can look here, you've got, again, a wider center, sort of matching up with the hams. So as we talked about earlier, you want that to be a smaller section in there, but yeah, so 1.2 inches of back fat they measured off off of that animal. And here you've got a nice trim center around the loin. And then you can see very small, very minimal back fat on that animal. So again, just a comparison across those, and you can see those differences. So how you measure those, look at those in the live hog, and then how those actually look on the carcass, relating those back together. So breeding gilts, again, as Ben talked about, you want a good underline. So you need a high quality underline with at least 6 teats on each side, and ideally 7. So you've got on the top panel there a good representation of a good underline. Okay, and then teats with good teat spacing. And then on the bottom would be a bad, poor underline. Okay, no pin nipples. You've got non-functional teats, poor spacing, etc. in there. So you want to avoid animals looking like that for on the breeding gilt side. Breeding gilts, as far as the vulva, again, Ben talked about this already. So just some images to reinforce that. So you've got a good vulva there, picture, and then a couple of bad vulvas there looking at. So just not uniform and not of shape and size that you're looking for. So we've talked sort of some indications of selecting the animals. We'll think about some on-farm considerations as we go here. So think about bringing that pig home, thinking about the daily care. Who's going to take care of the pig on a daily basis? Okay, so make sure that somebody can take care of them, manage them. Everyone's going to give them feed and water on a daily basis. Ideally, you got your YCQA completed. So that's Youth for the Quality Care of Animals. And that covers 3 topics, main topics, if you will, on their food safety, animal well-being, and then character development of the youth. Talk about housing, thinking about your shelter and your pen, think about the temperature of where they're going to be. Think about ventilation, whether they need to include a fan certain periods of time, especially if it's hot, you need the air to move through. So consider that. Consider what space you're going to provide for your animal. And then if you're going to have straw, if they need bedded down, you make sure you're keeping that changed and dry and well managed. And ideally, you want to have pigs housed with other pigs because they will grow better when they're housed with other animals. So you want to work with your veterinarian, and that's, establish a relationship. So we call that the veterinary client patient relationship. So that's a relationship between you as the client and the patient, being the pig, and then the veterinarian. So that working with them, again, finding those people to talk to. I talk about those specifics on antibiotic use, vaccinations, etc., deworming, those types of products. Ben touched on this already. Again, preventive antibiotic before shipment. And you need health papers for going across state lines, and so you need to work with your veterinarian to obtain those. Thinking about those specifics for vaccinations in your area. Ben talked already. Again, remember, if you're commingling animals, you want to have them with a health status or a known health status. So you may want to isolate them, keep them biosecure for a period of time before you start mixing them with nose to nose with your other existing animals. And if you're housing outside, make sure you're considering parasites. Watch those animals if they make sure they're not going to get sunburned. So water, the most essential nutrient. And we know the requirement for water depends on the body weight and the feed intake. And likewise, feed intake depends on water intake. So the healthy water intake drives feed intake, and then the feed that they're consuming requires that water. Okay, so there's some suggestions of water intake per day based on whether piglets and finishing pigs. Of course, those differ depending on temperature, humidity, health, and stress of the animal. I want to distinguish between water consumption versus water disappearance. So how much of the water are they actually drinking, and how much are they potentially playing with or spraying down, or how much are they losing? in their environment rather than actually what they're actually consuming. So just be cognizant of that. So pigs generally prefer the bowl drinkers, but they must be clean. So you can see in the image there, that square box one is one that can get dirty being on the floor like that. There are versions of that that actually lift up very easily, and so you can flush out the water on a daily basis and get them cleaned out. Same with the bowl drinkers, that piglet's got his nose in there. You need to go through on a regular basis and clean those, make sure they're nice and clean so they have clean access to water. You'll see less water wastage with bowl drinkers than with nipple drinkers. And those nipples, when you're using nipple drinkers, should be about shoulder height so the pig can reach up and drink water from them. We talked already about how water intake can affect feed intake, and so we want to make sure that we're having correct water flow rate is also a factor. So pigs expect, if you will, a certain amount of water to come at a certain amount of period of time, and so you want to adjust your flow rate to make sure those pigs are consuming the amount of that water at a rate that they like. Again, if you're using a water pan, you want to dump out the old water before adding fresh, clean water. So you can see this is, poor guys here has kind of got the nose in some pretty dirty water, so we want to clear that out. Show pig nutrition. Again, Ben talked this already. You want to keep on those diets that they came from the breeder. Talk with your breeder, talk with the show pig company, work on those with those specialty diets through those pigs to the greater weights, getting ready for the show. You may consider keeping them on a starter pellet from up to 60 or 50 or 60 pounds. You may find some of those, again, those young animals may be on high levels of zinc, which will affect growth performance. They get over 35 pounds body weight, then you can transition them over to grain, soybean meal diets. And they generally lower the protein and the pigs eat more. So again, their requirement for protein and nutrients goes up, but because they eat more, you reduce the amount that's in the particular diet. Make sure you allow free access to feed and clean water. And just some general recommendations. So you've got there in your 20% crude protein diets, again, the 1.3% total lysine. And the reason we talk about that is that that's the first limiting amino acid for nutrition. And so as nutritionists myself, that's what we focus in on is what are the lysine levels and how do the other amino acids relate to that? So point being there, yeah, you've got the 20% crude protein, dial them into 18% crude protein and a 16% crude protein. So if you're formulating your own diets, you need to be very specific on and careful to make sure you're getting them enough protein for these pigs. Thinking about average daily gain for about 1.7 to 2 pounds per day, depending on their age and weight. And thinking about 5 to 6 pounds per day for feed so that you're having sufficient quantities of feed provided and available for these pigs. So just to summarize, remember about the skeleton. You want a good skeleton, good hip design, a good profile to those animals. Think about the muscle indicators. And again, talking with your breeder, other people around in the show pig industry, look at those indicators of those specific animals. Thinking about daily care, thinking about housing, health, water, feed, how are you taking care of them, working with your veterinarian, working with other show pig participants and discussing those with those people. Ultimately, you want to get ready for the show. And in a few months' time, we're going to do another one of these, and we're going to specifically look at that. So the Little International Show, or Little I, is a few weeks out here in South Dakota, and we're going to get some video of them fitting and some of the show pigs here, and we'll be able to present that potentially later in the summer when you guys are getting ready for your shows. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Sarah and Jamie if you want to have any questions and put Ben on the hot seat.
The first new question for Ben or Ryan, how does flooring affect growth? Grate, cement, or good old dirt? What are your thoughts?
I think if you got concrete has to be well taken care of in the right kind of concrete, so you're not having the animals and good quality. So it can keep them cleaner and it can keep them cooler on concrete, so that can have an impact on growth rates and those type of things for sure.
Yeah, I would say, I think as far as growth rate, the biggest difference maybe is if you are on dirt, they may be more apt to get worms, and you know, which you just got to worm the pigs, and that's fine. Some people want to have them on dirt rather than concrete in terms of if their skeleton, their structure needs it for more comfort and cushion than just a solid concrete floor. You know, it actually helps them in their soften in their angles if they're too straight, if they are on dirt. But be aware, you know, more likely to get worms. You got to take care of that, or else growth will be definitely affected.
It's really a good day when one question leads to another, right? The next question was, let's talk about deworming and what you recommend.
I'd say every month you better get after it. There's a lot of different ways. It's probably easiest for most families with the show pig projects just to get a top dress on the feed, where you can do it for whatever that label recommends. You know, of course, there's also injectable, or you mix in with feeds. But if you're just dealing with a limited number of pigs and you want to get it religiously done, monthly, mark it on your calendar, find a product that can just easily top dress.
And I'll add to that, because we have some interesting problems here in the Northwest. We never used to have whipworm, but there's been enough pigs come in from different areas that now we have whipworm. If you know you have whipworm, you have to make sure that the product you're using does cover whipworm, because that's one that is not approved on all the labels. We also are seeing some external parasite issues. Again, make sure you're using a product that actually works on what problems you do have. Sarah, do you have anything to add to that locally?
Well, and unfortunately, the whipworm, just because you got rid of your pig last year doesn't mean that you got rid of your whipworm problems. Those are staying in the ground, I think, up to 7 years. So that is a very hard one to get away, to get rid of, and is deathly. So you might even have to look to getting them off the ground. Product-wise, we've had a really hard time finding products to take care of that. But just because you got rid of it last year doesn't mean it left your pen.
Yeah,
they may have left the worms behind.
Correct. And that's also when we get into, just like what they talked about, a benefit of concrete is you have a better control over what parasites your animals are being introduced to. Okay, let's see. I think, Sarah, do you have any other questions for Ben or Ryan?
Well, I've seen this happen, and I like both Ben and Ryan to talk about this. You know, we see supplements out there, and sometimes we think a little is good and a lot is even better. Those protein levels, what's our optimum level that, you know, so we have a minimum for these show pigs because we know they're a little bit different than our average pigs, versus can we get it too high?
I guess my comment on that, it can vary so far extremes based on the genetics of the pig, or based on the phenotypic build. I mean, there's some pigs that will absolutely need a 14% because they are just built with too much muscle. And there's pigs that can handle a 20% all the way. So it's really all about the genetics behind them, their build, to determine what protein. But I guess 14 to 20 would be the most common range.
Perfect. So Ben, you're raising show pigs. You grew up in the 4-H and FFA. If there was a young person that's just getting started, pretty new and green to it, What's that one word of advice or those couple things take home message you would tell them?
Ask questions and don't give up.
Don't give up. I think that's probably a really good piece of advice. I grew up in the show industry too, and I tell you what, the competition is deep and it's hard. And I think sometimes we think if we go buy the perfect pig, or I tell people it's a whole lot easier to win a show, even at a county fair level 20 years ago than it is today, just with the level of competition. So that not give up. Credible advice. You know, Ben, I've been watching some of the chats here, and obviously I don't raise pigs. I love the pig industry. I love pork, but I really like working with swine producers. But I think finding somebody that has a great reputation and is in it for all the right reasons, and it looks like your family has definitely developed a reputation, not only in raising good pigs, but also helping mentor people up through this, because it doesn't happen overnight. It's kind of hard that way. So thank you there. Ryan, is there any last thoughts you would like to leave people with?
I think no, exactly. Work with your breeder, work with your nutrition company. Again, from a nutritionist perspective, which I am, again, we make sure you're feeding those hogs, and so you can achieve what we call protein deposition maximum, get those hogs as lean and ready for show as possible. So
good deal. Jamie, do you have any last minute advice as a show pig producer, as a mom of 4 kids?
Right. We've been in the show ring with hogs and steers. I would say the other thing is, if you're just starting out, look online and watch the sales. They're fun to watch, but don't think that you have to buy the most expensive pig to just get the experience. If you can find a breeder that you are happy to be working with, that has a pig that's healthy and it's the right age and it's going to produce a carcass that's what the consumer needs, go for it. Don't feel like you have to buy the most expensive pig available just to get started. Get into the project, see how it goes, and then as you decide that this is something that you definitely want to do, then get more involved in trying to get that pig that might be super competitive. But don't feel like your first year out, that's where you have to be.
Yeah, there's lots of good things to come out of our 4-H and FFA program. So, well, with that, I want to thank Ben for sure for coming on and being our guest speaker here today and helping us navigate the show pig world. Thanks, Jamie, for manning all the questions. I've learned that I can't bring up my question in chats or else it blocks out the screen. And of course, Ryan, it's always great to work with you guys from South Dakota State. I think we're making a great team here. Our football teams might not be very good, but we can get this show pig thing done. So I'm pretty impressed with that. We will be back here April 9th, and it's looking like it's probably going to be something in the nursery or processing. You guys asked for a lot of detailed information on processing pigs, everything from castration, vaccination techniques, and that's probably where our direction will be going, and we'll get the information out to you then. So with that, I'm pretty impressed we stayed on time, only 3 minutes over. I'm going to send you guys off and have a great day. Oh, one last reminder, you will be getting your survey as you log off. And I will also, it'll also come out in an email tomorrow if you guys can for sure fill that out. It's a simple 5 questions. And I will have this posted video, probably edited by tomorrow afternoon. And I'll send that link to you guys that are all registered. There was many people that wanted this recorded because kids were in school for once here in Washington. So with that, thank you guys and have a great weekend.
Sarah,
Thanks,
I have
Ryan.
one person. Can we stay on for a minute?
Yep, we can
Perfect.
stay on.
I'm
sure
more
Ben
questions.
has no pigs to feed.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, the sun's beautiful. We're happy calves are dropping right now. It's good.
Yep, what's the question?
We're talking about alternative feeds besides corn in Alaska. So winter, you can if you can type in what size of pigs you're looking at feeding.
So we have some people attending from Alaska, and obviously they don't have the feed sources like you guys do.
Right.
So Ryan, you have some advice? on alternative feeds in Alaska, or do you need a vacation to Alaska to evaluate this?
Yeah.
Well, I that does sound very good. In fact, we had a cruise which has now been pushed back 2 years because of COVID to go there. So it's a long overdue trip to get to Alaska. The advice I do have is you need to know something about those feed ingredients and how those pigs are going to react to them. So I don't off the top of my head have ideas on those. I would have to go to a reference book to see what options there are.
So it sounds like they do have access to peas and barley, which
Okay.
In the PNW, I'm sure you're familiar, we feed a lot of pigs with pea and barley. And I usually tell people, you know what, we can make peas and barley work with a pig that's 80 pounds or more and one that's just 80. When we get out of those two ranges, we have to do a little more access. But the good news is those are especially on the smaller pig side, those are the smaller amounts of feed they eat. So it's not extremely expensive to bring in a little bit of soy to make it work or something like that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good advice. So, and then being from Canada myself, yeah, this corn soy was foreign to me when I came here about 10 years ago. So yeah, the peas and canola meal and all those type of things would have been typical in feed ingredients growing up. So
Yep, and I'm Dr. Froseth did a lot of work with peas, and I remember reading at some point someone saying, "Oh my God, it was a magical thing that you could feed peas," and Froseth was like, "Yeah, 20 years ago, buddy, 20 years ago." Okay, I'll just go ahead and answer this one here. Anyway.
Well, I see a person that says our fair pigs need to be 200 pounds minimum in August. So do I get a pig that weighs 50 to 60 pounds now to be 220? I would tell you 220 is going to be a very, very lean pig. So don't shoot for the minimum. And if you have a train wreck, a hot day, I say, and Ryan and Ben, correct me, optimum pig weights for these, anything from a commercial pig to a show pig, are we talking 275 to 300?
yeah, we'd be 285, 290 here in Midwest for a market hog. Yeah.
Yeah, just to check if there was an upper weight limit as well, that, you know, to not have it, you know, generally they're 300 and upper weight limits, but it may be 280 on a rare case. An upper
Yeah,
weight limit.
most of ours in Washington are 300. I have seen some issues. That's why we had to up it. We used to be about a 285, but these heavy muscle pigs appropriately finished, it was kind of hard to get that pig in there at that 285. So we pushed it up. But 220 to me is, I wish your fair would have a minimum of at least 245, to tell you the truth, to make it optimal bacon making pig. I think that takes care of does that take care of the questions, Jamie?
Let me just keep typing for a minute and it'll be good.
Yep, I think that's it. So with that, I'm gonna let Ben and Ryan go because it is it's 6 o'clock there, isn't it? No, you guys are 5 o'clock.
Yep.
5 o'clock there. I'm thinking farther Midwest. So again, thank you guys. We greatly appreciate it, and we will be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll let you, I'm not gonna log out, Jamie. I'll just let you keep answering it. And a lot of those were Alaska questions.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah, and you know, you guys are here in Alaska. Obviously, I'm sure you can get commercial feed, but I know how expensive it is in here, so I can't imagine how expensive similar feed might be in Alaska. So if you do have access to local feed, which obviously there's grains grown in Alaska, just to make it work with you. So yeah. Anyway,
so if you can get nutritional evaluation of those feeds, and there's a lot of some feed staff books that have those alternative feeds, and it is a good point. I see that it says over 300 you don't get paid for that. So knowing your maximum, and your pigs in Alaska might not be as big as the state's pigs here, because when I first came to Washington State here and started this job over 20 years ago, we were 225. Our top pigs were about 275. Our average good pig was right in that 265. And you can see in 20 years, we pushed more to that 285, 295. So I think it's just that genetics. So if you know you can't go that heavy, but a 220-pound pig, if it's, you know, kind of a typical commercial pig, my question is, does it have enough back fat on it to give us that inch belly wall that Paul Cooper talked about last week to have good bacon? Because if we get pigs that are too lean, lean is good that you don't have too much excess fat, but fat gives flavor and fat makes bacon. And so that's why we typically say we want these pigs at that 275 to 295 minimum, so that we get that 1 inch body wall, because we need at least about 6/10 to 7/10 of back fat to have that inch body wall.
Yep. But definitely if you're at a fair, you know, look what your minimums and maximums are, so that you stay in with that range. My parents grew up, or my dad grew up showing hogs. So this would have been, you know, 60 years ago. And my grandma remembers starting out at that point, a good market hog was 180. And we take her to the fair today and she just can't believe how big these pigs are that are winning things. But that just, you know, says how far we've progressed and how much more efficient we have. Sarah, when's the next webinar?
April 9th will be the next webinar. Yeah, actually, that's become one of the issues that I deal with fairs, because our facilities have not kept up with the size of our pigs. Most of our pig pens and fair facilities were built, you know, some of them 50, 60 years ago. And that poor pig, he can't get into the pen anymore. So, yeah, but you know, I've never been to Alaska. I hope to get there someday. So I have got to talk to some of your sheep breeders. I do a shearing school and stuff. And I know because of feed cost and sourcing feed, that you do go for a little bit smaller scaled animal. So, you know, I guess if you showed us some pictures and breeds and genetics, we'd be able to better identify. But if your minimum's 200, you know, and your max is whatever, definitely shoot for that more optimal weight when they're finished than what the minimum is. I judge a lot of fairs, and I send out show lambs to people, and I tell them, you don't want to be at the minimum, because let's say the lamb, we have a heat or it injures itself, then we're pushing it. It's always easier to slow an animal down than push an animal up. I don't want to hold an animal excessively, but I can slow an animal down a whole lot easier than make up weight in the end when it's hot here in the basin.
And Sarah, we should also put a plug in that, you know, we'd probably be willing to come judge I've heard great stories about judging at the Alaska State Fair.
Yeah, I hear we judge everything. So yeah, if you need judges, we can judge rabbits and chickens and the whole thing. We'd love to come to Alaska.
Last person I heard, Randy Wiggins, got to go up to be the judge at the Alaska State Fair, and I heard he had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any other questions up there that we can Would we judge cattle there? Well, I think Sarah and I could figure it out. What do you think?
Yeah, Jamie, their family raises seed stock Angus right now, so she's very well versed in that. My family, we do commercial cattle, so I claim to be a sheep person, but my background heritage is in the cattle. I just tell people I like the sheep better. They're not as scary, intimidating to me.
Yep. And I grew up with hogs, and I tell people I grew up a dry land hog farmer, and I married an irrigated cattle guy. So I guess I have a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, we love having you guys on here from Alaska. Like I said, some of my best shearing students have come from Alaska, and you guys are a lot of fun. I just know that sometimes our advice is a little out of context just because of the issues that you face sourcing feed compared to, especially us here in the basin. As Jamie said, her husband is a hay farmer, and so hay is plentiful and easy to find, and so sometimes we're talking out of context. So just remind us of sometimes the parameters that you're working under.
Yeah, and don't be afraid if you have specific to, reach out to us and see what we can do. That's one of the other hats I wear as a livestock nutritionist, and I do a lot of work with people wanting to feed alternative feeds for various reasons. So if you have any specific questions, shoot us an email.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us from Alaska.
Yep.
That's
Well, with
pretty cool.
that, Jamie, I think unless there's nothing else in the chat.
Nothing new has been posted, so I think we're good.
Okay, well, great. We will see you guys in a month then.
Thanks, Sarah.
Have a great weekend. See you, Jamie.